You may have noticed this already, but much of the writing curriculum that is out there is falling short. Our students are still struggling. They aren't motivated. They're overwhelmed. They aren't getting the skills that they need. And I see teachers and parents scrambling all the time. What do you use for writing? What are you doing? What's working for you? And it feels like we're on this wheel of constant just trying to find each other out there and see if anyone has an answer to this. I have an answer that is working for me, and I want to share what that is and how it came to be, and tell you a little bit about the families and the teachers who are using it and the results that they're getting. I'm Robin Mellum, if you're new here, and I am a teacher and instructional coach. I'm also a children's book writer. I've published over 10 novels with Disney and HarperCollins and Houghton Mifflin. So when I left the classroom, I learned so much in those writing years from my editors, and I realized that there's a lot of stuff. It's not that we're not teaching it, it's just not taught with the same level of emphasis that's really necessary in order to have a really successful writing life, essentially. And we all need a writing life. No matter what business we go into, not everyone's going to become a novelist, but not everyone's going to become a doctor either, right? But we still have to have the basic foundation of science and understanding how it all works. It's the same thing with writing. You're going to need to write in every business that you do, and you need to appeal to your customer, which is your reader in this instance. So in this one, I want to talk mostly to homeschool parents, but teachers, you will get something out of this one as well, of what is it that you're looking for in a writing program and where are they falling short. I'm going to point out some things that I think might be the problem and then how you can fix that. So I'm going to take you to my screen and show you a couple of examples. So in my opinion, homeschool parents have this harder than most traditional classrooms have it. And when you're in a school, you're told this is your curriculum. This is the one that we vetted. This is what we think will work with your students. But for you at home, you're having to sift through everything and figure out what works for your student and what's going to motivate them and what's going to get them to the next level. And you're kind of doing this on your own, right? So what I want to talk about is things that you might be finding or noticing in some of the curriculum that you're coming across, and just kind of walk you through like where my thinking is with this and what I think would help your students at home. So one of the problems is that oftentimes they will start with this idea of we need to work on grammar before expression. And what I mean by that is that there's this idea that, well, if they just kind of worked on the basics, if they know the noun and the verb and all that, then they could write all of a sudden. But if you think about if I were to teach basketball to someone and I wanted to teach them the mechanics of how, a ball, when you throw it at this certain angle, lands and goes down, whatever, I'm making all this up. But if I only showed you a diagram of it or a picture of it or a handbook about how to shoot a basketball, you're not going to learn it. You have to shoot a basketball. So you have to learn how to express yourself first before the grammar's ever going to stick. And so they could be front loading that mechanics part of it too soon. The kids need to be motivated to take a piece of work, what they're writing, and then to apply those grammar rules to what they are writing. Doing it in isolation where you have these certain sentences and they have to find it, it's not great. Even though I do, on the part 2 of my warm-ups, I do some kind of grammar stuff where they have to identify things, because there are a lot of, for the state test, there's a lot of like ticky-tacky things that they have to know for that. And I tell them that this is my ticky-tacky slide. And they focus on it for a week. I'm actually going to show you those in a moment. But if you're front loading too much on mechanics and not on expression first, that can be a problem. So you want to focus on the writing of a strong sentence and expressing an idea before we get into what is a noun. I mean, if they're younger, they should know what a noun and a verb and predicate is, all that kind of stuff, like the basics of it, so that you can have a common language. And if they don't, just use those words as they're writing. Oh, I like this sentence. Look, there's your noun. There's your da. And then have them point it out, and then they can get that common language. But you don't want to jump into just the worksheet part of it all, because then they just become kids who follow the rules and not writers. It's two totally different things. If you tell me to do this and this and this, okay, that doesn't mean you can write. They're totally different. And one time, side story, when I when I got my book published and I ran into someone who said, "Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I could never be a writer because I just can't spell." And I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, writing is not a spelling competition. You know that, right? It's not that at all. It's the expression of ideas and stories, and that's a bigger picture thing. It's not the little things. Okay. Next, the curriculum might be jumping straight into essays too quickly. They might just be like, okay, this is the format. You need to get ready. Here's all the research you need to do. They're getting into the essay part too quick. And I would say that writing a 5-paragraph narrative essay is actually the highest level of writing, and often they start with those. Narrative essay writing, when done well, will take all of the writing skills that I teach in workshop all at the same time. It is actually a symphony of the most important writing skills, along with how to tell a story. It's high level stuff. So I always wait for that final one. They're doing little things along the way that I'll show you what they're doing every day. But this one, it should come at the end. So that, because they're like, you need to sprint, but you haven't learned to walk yet. So, and that the walking part is developing a way to express yourself. And my first lesson is on voice, and that's how you get them into it. So by using sentence fluency, which I talked about a couple of videos ago, but daily sentence fluency, motivation, and experimentation, it's far more crucial at this point to do those things before you can say, what is a passive verb, whatever. Okay, third, they might rely on rigid templates and worksheets too much. So it might feel like if you just go from the beginning of this workbook to the end of the workbook, know how to write. But what that does is it creates students who are relying on you. They are relying on you giving them the input, the information. They aren't making decisions for themselves. They should be doing a lot of decision making. And starting with voice and getting into the skills will help build their confidence. And then the way I set up my workshop, where there are leaders and there are like designed choices, they develop autonomy, and they're in charge of the workshop. I mean, I kind of know, of course, like what we're going to do and everything, but they actually also know. So I have a wheel of the skills that we work on, so they know what we're working on next. They know for the whole year what we're doing. There are no surprises. And I haven't come across any writing curriculum that teaches voice. Nothing. Not a single one anywhere. I feel like I'm the only person who's out here like banging this drum. And I came across not too long ago, I was like on Twitter, and there was a literary agent on there who was asking for writing and her number one thing was writing that has emotional reactions and gets deeper into the point of view of the character. And what she was describing was voice, which is how I teach that, which is how do you get your character to sound like a human? And kids are so good at this. Adults have such a hard time. It's like that bell in the Polar Express. We can't hear it, but the kids can. And they pick up on this skill so quickly. So I highly recommend starting every year with voice over and over every year. Because if you're doing too much with worksheets, it's fill in the blank and it's busy work. And they are being passive. So they are sitting back, they're waiting. They're waiting for you to tell them what to do next. But that's not how writing can or should work. It should be so fulfilling that they want to eagerly make those decisions. So if they become bored, then the writing that you're going to have to read is boring. So this will help your life too. So here's what I suggest. You try a structured writing method, which sounds really boring, but it's actually not. It just means there are systems in place that will hit and address all these things that I just talked about. So it is skill-based, it is student-led, and it uses constructivist pedagogy. And I'm going to define that one because I love it. I love it. I love it. And it's all part of this. So constructivist pedagogy is a teaching approach where learners actively construct their own understanding of concepts through experience, exploration, and social interaction rather than passively receiving information. So you build in situations in which they try to figure out their own definition, their own understanding of this concept. They experience it, they play around with it, they tinker, which is why we have a weekly workshop where they are supposed to tinker. They are constructing their idea of how all this should work. They're exploring, and then they're in trios. And if you have just one student at home, you could do this together, where you have partners. But if some of you I know have small groups, so that you could have your students partner up at home, or have trios yourself. And they're not passive. So we're not just sitting around waiting for information to be given to us. Like it's like a practice. So, like baseball practice. So if you start with, here's like the roadmap here. We're going to start with confidence. And that's where you're going to start with a voice lesson. And then we're going to get into ownership, where the kids make decisions and they are leaders. They introduce it. They're talking. They're talking to each other. And in the workshop there, they do the skills. And then the skills will lead to the mastery, which is where we start to do the essays. And then mastery will lead to transfer of knowledge, where we can now do it in any situation and pivot at any moment. That's the key. So I'm going to take you through one more little map here. In the structured writing method, these are the 4 main components that I implore that you do, that you do it in this way, because they all connect to each other. And without one, it's not going to make sense. So if you start daily with sentence combining practice, which are my warm-ups that I do, I talked about this in the last video or two. Go back if you need to. But the sentence combining, where they're doing compound complex sentence every day, and that has to be done with perfection. And then they do, like I said, the ticky-tacky slide, where we're doing like a little bit of language in there. That's a test-taking situation where they can practice, where they eliminate an answer and all that stuff. That's good practice. The third one, they're doing a quick write every day, every single day. And what's so cool was that recently I had a teacher who told me, I think she's 4th grade, and they had just finished their state testing. And she said the students said that they felt like in the writing portion that the quick writes helped them. The quick writes. And not the essays that they don't know yet, but the quick writes. And I think it had to do with being able to think on the spot and pivot and respond to something and have the confidence that they could do that, and use dialogue. And, sometimes the testing questions are kind of fun. Not always, but like sometimes they are. So you're doing this daily work. That is a non-negotiable. This is all non-negotiable. But next is that we do the weekly practice in the workshop. This is where they are tinkering and exploring, and then we go through the wheel. These are in a wheel there, and we go in order, where we start with voice, and then we learn a skill. Sometimes we hang on a little bit longer than, like, I would do voice and hooks and sentence complexity longer than figurative language, vivid imagery, and show don't tell. Because you'll get more bang for your buck with those first 3. Those can apply to so many different types of writing situations. And the last 3 are kind of specific that they can practice, but, show don't tell is fantastic, but it's nowhere near as important as having a voice and writing an amazing hook to everything you can possibly think of. Once they get that down, the way that I teach them hooks, that's so much better when they start to do a project because they are like, oh, I know how to do this hook. I know how to make it interesting. They love it. So we've got the daily sentence work. We've got weekly skill practice. They're not getting graded on the skill practice because they are practicing. They need time to experiment and not feel like they're, being judged. And then within that, at every moment that I possibly can find, I do CER practice. So claim, evidence, reasoning, because this works with so many different types of writing that's required of them. And then, of course, particularly for their argument essay. But if they can get these small little paragraphs down in small spurts, right? Give them a passage, respond. Give them a passage and respond. Then pivot and do it into a lit analysis. Maybe you're reading a novel, right? CER paragraph, just little snippets here and there all the time, whenever you have a moment. They will get used to writing a paragraph that makes a claim, that they're citing text evidence and they're explaining their reasoning. They're not going to be scared of that. And then they'll understand that, oh yeah, those paragraph thingies that we've been doing, those are actually the body paragraphs of all the essays that we do. So then when we're doing essays, that's where this constructivist pedagogy comes in, where instead of telling them, here are all the parts of an essay that you need to memorize, I just give them these strips of paper, and there are essays all cut up in there, several different ones. And they have to figure out in a group, look at these titles and these labels, what goes in what order and what makes sense. So they are constructing their own view of what a good essay should look like. And then it just creates really great conversations about, does this match with a rebuttal? What is a rebuttal? Oh, it's on, and it's such great conversations. And then they remember it, because otherwise, memorizing all of that stuff is just a fool's errand. So these are the main parts of the writing program that I do. There's a whole lot of motivation and thought that goes into this, but you want to build a roadmap to get through the whole year with all these things that I'm saying, right? And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to backwards plan. And I am going to walk you through that one in the next video. So you're going to click on this next box up here, and I'm going to show you how I plan for writing for the entire year. And you are going to get a really cool freebie in that one. So I'll see you in the next video.